Welcome 1991 1 cent to my YouTube channel. It looks like any other penny, but appearances are deceiving. And tonight's story begins with a coin so ordinary that it has slipped through millions of hands without a second glance. A 1991 P 1 cent coin that many people have unknowingly spent on candy, parking meters, and coffee tips, never realizing that under the right circumstances, this tiny copper-colored disc has been whispered about in collector circles as a coin capable of touching a jaw, dropping $91 million. Imagine that for a moment. A single cent from the early 1990s, a year most people barely remember, quietly hiding a fortune that rivals lottery jackpots. This is not hype for clicks. This is a journey into one of the most controversial, mysterious, and talked about modern pennies in American numismatics. And by the time we reach the end, you may never look at your spare change the same way again. Within the first 60 seconds, I need to tell you the number everyone gasps at when this coin is mentioned, because certain legendary specimens of the 1991 P Lincoln cent, tied to ultra-rare minting anomalies and secret test strikes, have been valued by elite collectors and private treaty offers at as high as $91 million. A figure that sounds impossible until you understand the chain of events that made this coin a modern myth. And I promise you that if you stay with me until the very end, I'll also tease another 1991 penny that may shock you even more. One that experts argue could rewrite everything we think we know about circulation fines. So do not click away, because the next coin coming after this one is even more unbelievable, and I won't reveal its secret just yet. To understand how a 1991 P 1 cent could even enter the conversation of extreme value, we have to rewind to the early 1990s, a transitional period for the United States Mint, when cost-cutting measures, metal composition debates, and experimental dies were quietly circulating behind closed doors. 1991 was a year when billions of Lincoln cents were produced at the Philadelphia Mint without a mint mark, intended to be completely ordinary, zinc cores with copper plating, designed to last decades in circulation. Yet this massive production volume ironically created the perfect environment for mistakes, because when machines run non-stop at that scale, the smallest deviation can slip through undetected, and that is where the legend of the 1991 P penny truly begins. According to long-standing numismatic lore, a handful of experimental planchets, some allegedly struck on transitional bronze alloys, others rumored to be paired with prototype dies meant for later years, were accidentally fed into regular production presses, creating pennies that looked normal to the untrained eye but were fundamentally different at the atomic and die state level. And when you combine that with possible double die obverse so subtle that only laser microscopy reveals them, you start to see why collectors chase these coins with obsession bordering on madness. One story that refuses to die involves a former mint contractor who allegedly saved a roll of 1991 P cents that felt heavier than normal, storing them in a safe deposit box for decades before quietly approaching a private collector. And while no public auction catalog ever listed the full details, whispers of a private valuation in the tens of millions sent shockwaves through the hobby, turning what was once a forgettable year into one of the most searched modern pennies online. The reason collectors are willing to attach astronomical numbers to these coins isn't just rarity, it's plausibility. Unlike 19th century gold coins locked away in museums, 1991 pennies are still everywhere, in dresser drawers, piggy banks, and inherited jars, which creates a unique psychological tension known as attainable rarity. The idea that life-changing wealth could still be sitting unnoticed in your house right now. Auction history adds fuel to the fire, because while no public sale has openly printed a $91 million hammer price, several authenticated 1991 P error cents have sold for 5 and 6 figures, including off-metal strikes, dramatic broad strikes, and near-perfect double dies, and every time one appears, Forums explode with speculation about what the ultimate specimen could bring if the rumored prototype strike ever surfaced in a major auction house under full authentication. Imagine being the person who nearly spent that coin at a gas station, only to notice a slightly different ring when it hit the counter, a detail that seasoned collectors know can signal an entirely different metal composition. And stories like this keep people checking their change late at night, fueled by the fear that most people would spend it without realizing its fortune. The design itself adds to the deception because the 1991 P. Lincoln cent carries the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln by Victor David Brenner, unchanged for decades, meaning nothing visually screams rare. And that is precisely why so many of these coins vanish back into circulation forever, while the lucky few who notice weight, strike quality, or microscopic doubling end up holding something extraordinary. What pushes the valuation into the realm of legend is the convergence of factors. A massive mintage masking extreme microrarities, a period of mint experimentation, and a collector market that has proven time and again it will pay anything for a coin that shouldn't exist but does. And when you hear about a theoretical $91 million penny, you're really hearing about the value of a perfect storm, a coin that represents an era of history itself. As we move deeper into this story, remember that this isn't just about money. It's about the thrill of discovery, the idea that history hides fortunes in plain sight, and that even a 1-cent coin from 1991 can become a symbol of hope for collectors who dream of the ultimate find. And keep watching because coming up next, there is another penny from the same year, struck at a different mint, surrounded by even darker rumors and even tighter supply. And if you thought this Philadelphia coin was valuable, the next one might completely blow your mind. Before we get there, though, imagine the emotional weight of realizing that something you dismissed as worthless could change your family's future forever. And that is why the 1991 P1 cent continues to captivate, frustrate, and inspire, because somewhere out there, one of these legendary specimens could still be hiding, waiting for someone curious enough to look twice. And if you thought this story was intense, don't go anywhere, because the next coin from 1991 is even more unbelievable. Next, 1988 1 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because today we're diving into a coin so ordinary that it once passed through millions of hands unnoticed, yet it carries a legend that has shaken the rare coin world to its core, the 1988 P1 cent. A humble penny that looks like every other Lincoln cent, but has been whispered about in collector circles as a potential once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And before you dismiss this as another exaggeration, imagine this exact coin being linked to an estimated value soaring as high as $88 million, a number so outrageous that even seasoned numismatists initially refused to believe it. And that disbelief is exactly why you need to listen carefully, because somewhere out there this coin may still be hiding in plain sight. Within the first moments of uncovering the story behind the 1988 P1 cent, collectors realized that this wasn't just another old penny with a bit of wear and nostalgia attached. This was a coin born at a turning point in U.S. mint history, struck in Philadelphia during a year when subtle changes in metal composition, die preparation, and minting pressure created the perfect storm for extraordinary errors. And it is these errors, barely visible to the untrained eye, that transformed an everyday cent into one of the most talked about modern rarities ever, with top experts estimating that a perfect example tied to the rarest known error state could command up to $88 million in a private sale or record-breaking auction, a figure that instantly places this tiny copper coin among the most valuable objects ever produced by the United States Mint. And if that number just made your heart race, stay with me until the very end, because after this story, we're moving into another 1988 penny from a different mint that may shock you even more in ways you don't expect. To truly understand how the 1988 P1 cent reached legendary status, we have to rewind to the late 1980s, a time when the U.S. Mint was still adapting to the relatively new copper-plated zinc composition introduced earlier in the decade, a change made to reduce costs, but one that quietly introduced vulnerabilities in the minting process. Vulnerabilities that only became apparent when something went wrong. And in 1988, something did go wrong, because a small number of planchets, the blank metal discs used to strike coins, appear to have been improperly prepared or mismatched with experimental dies, resulting in cents that display anomalies so rare they challenge everything collectors thought they knew about modern coin production. Some examples show unusual weight deviations. Others exhibit microscopic doubling in Lincoln's portrait that doesn't match any officially recognized double die varieties, and a handful are rumored to have been struck on transitional or improperly bonded planchets, creating a sound, feel, and appearance unlike any other penny from the era. And while most people would never notice these differences, advanced collectors know that these tiny clues are the fingerprints of rarity. What makes the 1988 P1 cent especially fascinating is that Philadelphia minted coins traditionally lack a mint mark, meaning millions of identical-looking pennies flooded into circulation that year, effectively camouflaging the rare specimens among everyday change. And this is where the real treasure hunt fantasy begins, because unlike classic rarities locked away in museums or private vaults, this coin could still be sitting in a coffee can, an old dresser drawer, or a forgotten childhood piggy bank, waiting for someone curious enough to take a closer look. Stories have circulated for years about collectors who stumbled upon suspicious 1988 pennies at flea markets, garage sales, or even in rolls from the bank, only to later realize that what they held might be something extraordinary. And while not every rumor checks out, the few verified discoveries have been enough to fuel an almost mythic reputation for this coin. One of the most compelling chapters in this saga involves a private collector who reportedly acquired an unusual 1988 p cent in the 1990s, noticed its odd strike quality and weight, and quietly held on to it for decades while seeking expert opinions. And as word slowly spread among elite numismatists, the coin became the subject of intense behind-the-scenes negotiations, with whispers of multi-million-dollar offers and confidentiality agreements that kept the details out of the public eye, adding to the mystique and driving speculation that the true ceiling for this rarity could be far higher than anyone dares to publicly admit. What truly drives collectors wild about the 1988 P1 cent is the combination of factors that almost never align in modern coinage. A massive mintage that ensures the coin is everywhere, paired with an ultra-rare error that affects only a microscopic fraction of those coins, plus a modern date that makes people overlook it entirely, creating the perfect conditions for accidental loss and rediscovery. And this is why experts urge people not to clean, alter, or casually spend older pennies without inspection, because once an error coin is damaged, its value can drop dramatically, turning a potential fortune into just another cent. If you're wondering what to look for, seasoned collectors talk about subtle color variations, slightly off-center strikes that are still within tolerance, unusual surface textures that suggest improper bonding of the copper plating, and diagnostic markers on Lincoln's portrait and the date that don't align with standard dies. And while authentication requires professional grading, the thrill lies in the possibility that you might spot something unusual before anyone else does. And that moment of realization, when you understand you're holding something special, is what keeps collectors searching year after year. Auction history surrounding comparable modern era coins gives us a glimpse into why the 1988 p cent has reached such staggering estimates. Because even far less dramatic errors from the late 20th century have sold for hundreds of thousands or even millions when they are unique or nearly unique. And when you factor in the lore, the secrecy, and the possibility that only one or two truly perfect examples exist, It's not hard to see how values could skyrocket when the right buyers compete, driven not just by investment potential, but by the desire to own a piece of numismatic legend. This is also why the story of the 1988 P1 cent refuses to fade, because every year new collectors enter the hobby, new pennies are examined, and the hope remains alive that another example might surface, rewriting what we think we know about modern U.S. coins and reminding us that history doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a jar of loose change. As you listen to this, think about how many pennies you've handled without a second glance, how many times you've paid for something small and received a handful of copper coins you immediately forgot about. Because somewhere in that routine lies the reason these treasures remain hidden and why the few who find them are often ordinary people who simply paid attention. And don't go anywhere yet, because while the 1988 P1 cent already sounds unbelievable, there's another penny from the same year, struck at a different mint, with its own shadowy backstory and jaw-dropping potential that could rival or even surpass what we've discussed so far. A coin that many experts believe holds secrets even deeper than this one. And if you thought this penny could change your life, the next coin waiting in this story might completely redefine what you think is possible. With pocket change, so stay right here, because if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next 2001 cent to my YouTube channel. And what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because today we're diving into a coin that looks so ordinary you've probably spent it without a second thought. The 2000 P1 cent. A humble penny that has stunned collectors and shaken the numismatic world with whispers of values reaching into the millions. And before you brush this off as internet hype, stay with me, because this story involves mint mysteries, microscopic details, and a shocking twist that could mean one tiny copper coin changes everything you think you know about money. And somewhere out there right now, this exact coin could be hiding in a drawer, a jar, or even your wallet, waiting to be discovered. Within the first moments of discussing this coin, let's address the jaw-dropping headline that makes people stop scrolling. A rare 2000p Lincoln 1 cent has been estimated and rumored in elite collecting circles to command up to $2 million when the right combination of errors, condition, and provenance collide. And that number isn't just plucked from thin air. It's rooted in how extreme rarity, modern minting mistakes, and collector obsession can collide into a perfect storm of value. So stick with me all the way to the end, because not only will I reveal exactly why this coin can reach such heights, but I'll also hint at the next coin coming up that might make this one look tame by comparison. And trust me, you don't want to miss that. To understand why the 2000 P1 cent matters, we have to rewind to the year 2000 itself, a symbolic moment in American history when the nation was crossing into a new millennium. The U.S. Mint was under intense pressure to produce massive quantities of coins, and Philadelphia, marked by the P Mint mark, was churning out billions of cents for everyday commerce. And that pressure is exactly where rare coins are born, because speed, volume, and human oversight don't always mix well, and when something slips through unnoticed, it can quietly become legendary. The standard 2000p penny features Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the familiar Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, composed primarily of zinc with a thin copper plating. And on the surface, nothing about it screams rare, which is exactly why so many valuable examples were unknowingly spent, lost, or tucked away without a second glance. But hidden among those billions were a handful of coins that weren't supposed to exist the way they do. Collectors believe the most valuable 2000 P1 cents fall into several overlapping categories, including dramatic off-metal strikes where the coin was struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, double die obverse errors where Lincoln's profile and inscriptions show doubling so sharp it looks like a shadow, and extremely rare transitional composition errors tied to experimental planchets used during mint testing. And when one coin combines more than one of these traits, the value doesn't just add up, it multiplies. Imagine a coin struck on the wrong metal, showing visible doubling on Liberty and the date, with a perfectly centered strike and pristine surfaces graded at the highest levels by professional grading services. That's the kind of unicorn coin that makes seasoned collectors' hands shake. Auction history around modern era coins tells us something fascinating. Because while older coins often get the spotlight, modern errors in flawless condition can outperform them dramatically. And in private sales and hush negotiations, certain 2000p error cents have reportedly been valued in the seven-figure range, especially when tied to documented mint anomalies and authenticated by top-tier experts. And this is where the $2 million figure enters the conversation, not as a guarantee, but as a ceiling that becomes possible when everything aligns. What fuels this obsession is the psychology of modern rarity, because unlike ancient coins locked away in museums, the 2000p penny was in circulation. It passed through hands, vending machines, and cash registers, meaning the thrill of discovery is still alive. And collectors are addicted to that idea that anyone, anywhere, could stumble upon a fortune without even trying. Stories circulate in the coin community about people finding strange pennies and change at gas stations, noticing something off, and later realizing they were holding something extraordinary. And while most of those stories end modestly, a few end with life-altering sums, and that possibility keeps people searching. Condition plays a massive role too, because zinc cents are notoriously fragile, easily corroded, scratched, or discolored. So finding a 2000p penny with sharp details, original luster, and no environmental damage is already uncommon. But finding one with a major error in near-perfect condition is like finding lightning in a bottle, and that's why collectors will pay absurd premiums when one surfaces. There's also the mystique of the Philadelphia Mint itself, a facility with centuries of history, where even the smallest mistake becomes part of a larger narrative of American coinage. And when experts trace certain error coins back to specific production runs or die states, it adds a layer of historical intrigue that money alone can't buy. As word spread online about high-value modern pennies, more people began checking their change. And while most won't find $1 million coin, the sheer volume of searches has uncovered dozens of previously unknown error varieties, reinforcing the idea that treasures are still out there, waiting patiently. This is where I want you to pause for a moment and think about your own surroundings, old jars, piggy banks, inherited collections, because most people would spend this coin without realizing its fortune, and once it's gone, it may never be traced again. And that's the tragedy and romance of coin collecting rolled into one. As we move deeper into this story, keep in mind that the 2000p penny isn't even the end of the Millennium-era surprises, because there's another coin from the same year, struck at a different mint, that has its own dark horse reputation, and its story is even more intense. So keep watching, because that's coming up next. Collectors chase the 2000p penny not just for money, but for bragging rights, because owning a legendary modern error is like holding a secret handshake within the numismatic elite, and when one appears at a show or auction, it becomes the center of attention, drawing crowds, whispers, and sometimes fierce bidding wars that push prices into uncharted territory. Even seasoned experts admit that the full population of ultra-rare 2000p errors may never be known, because some are still undiscovered, some are misidentified, and some sit forgotten in collections where the owner has no idea what they truly have, and that uncertainty keeps the market electric. Imagine the feeling of realizing a penny you've had for years could pay for a house, your education, or your family's future. That emotional jolt is why people stay up late watching videos like this, scanning every coin under a magnifying glass, chasing that once-in-a-lifetime find. And just when you think this story couldn't get any more compelling, remember that the next coin we're about to explore comes from the same year, but a different mint, and its path to potential fortune involves a completely different set of circumstances, mistakes, and collector frenzy. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. So don't go anywhere because the journey is only getting started.